Hello and welcome. You're watching the Newsroom. Breaking this hour. The Indian Minister for Home Affairs Amit Shah has addressed the press following the bomb blast in the Indian capital. Home Minister Shah has provided details about the blast, such as the make and model of the car which initially exploded, being a Hyundai i20, as well as the time of the blast, which was 7:20 p.m. local time. The Home Minister also stated that he will be visiting the site of the blast shortly, and we can expect more updates on this front any minute. We have Brian Anthony Thomas joining us live from the site of the blast. Brian, I hope you can hear me loud and clear.
Yes, I can. Yes, clearly. Very unfortunate incident coming from the national capital. Clearly, when I'm showing you, we are outside the electricity hospital itself, and we are just a while back. Amit Shah left the venue, and clearly he took a cognizance of the situation. He met with Delhi Police Commissioner Satish Gokhale itself. And clearly, they have been saying the fact that the situation remains very worried. He even met with the victims who have been critically injured, and very distressing incident. This entire place have been completely cordoned off when the Home Minister was inside, and now heavy police barricading has also been done. Here also you can see the barricading have been done, and here we are outside Loknath LNJP Hospital, gate number 5, and very distressing incident again coming from the national capital. But now even the Home Minister has confirmed that 8 people unfortunately lost their lives, and there are several others who have been injured. And even the Home Minister met with the injured victims and had a meeting with the Delhi Police Commissioner. And now it is very important to see what happened, because at the crime site where this incident happened, the FSL team, bomb squad, dog squad, everyone in the Delhi Police, they all reached the space, and even now at this place, the situation looks extremely chaotic itself, what we are showing you.
Yes, right, Brian. Thank you so much for joining. We are also receiving breaking news at this point about the death toll that sources at the Loknayak Hospital in Delhi, where the injured have been taken, and have told us that 12 people have been declared dead so far. Israel has returned the bodies of 15 Palestinians to Gaza, a day after militants returned the remains of a hostage to Israel under the terms of the ceasefire agreement in the two-year war. The exchange marked another step forward for the tenuous US-brokered truce, and as part of the deal, Israel has returned the remains of 15 Palestinians for each Israeli hostage. The return came shortly after Israel confirmed the remains given back on Friday night were of an Israeli man who died while fighting Hamas in the terrorist organization on October 7, 2023 attack that started the war. Since the ceasefire took effect on October 10, Palestinian terrorists, Hamas terrorists have released the remains of 23 hostages, including Gaddafi's body, with 5 still remaining in Gaza. Let's in fact listen into what one of the Gazan health official had to say.
قد وصل إلينا طريق اللجنة الدولية للصليب الأحمر من 15 جثمانا من جثامين الشهداء المحتجزة لدى الجانب الإسرائيلي، ليرتفع عدد إجمالي الشهداء إلى 315 جثمانا.
Reports say that thousands of displaced Palestinian families in Gaza face winter rains and cold without adequate protection. Israeli restrictions are blocking the entire entry of life-saving shelter materials. Millions of shelter and are without food items are still stuck in Jordan, Egypt and Israel, awaiting approval from Israeli authorities. The shelter cluster, which coordinates humanitarian response in Gaza, warns that the conditions are rapidly deteriorating. Almost 1 month after the ceasefire agreement took effect, daily life remains a struggle for displaced families and remains scarce, and there is no sign of recovery. Let's listen in to what Mahmoud Antes, who was once a taxi driver and now lives with his family in a tent in Gaza City, shared his ordeal in the aftermath of the Israel-Gaza war.
وهي قعدت 4 أشهر المجاعة، بس بالشهرين من غير خبز، فيش خبز بالمرة. واحد يخلي المرة تعجن، طبعا انت بتتكسر وبتتفتفت وهذا تعجن هالمرة ويسندوا معدتهم شوية في الشهرين. يجينا مساعدات، يجينا دعم، يجينا حاجة. لا مساعدات ولا حاجة، فيش إلا التكية، ويمكن يوم بعد يوم ربطة خبز أو كل 3 أيام ربطة خبز. أولادي تقعد بس على قد قاعدة مثلا أخطو.
لحمة ونفسنا ناكل لكن فيش مصاري نوفر، ومش أنا اللي نفسي، خواتي كمان كلنا نفسنا في الحاجات الزاكية. نفسنا بلحمة، شاورما، فاكهة، قطعة موزة، كلمنتينا.
Now some breaking news coming in from the United States. The House Speaker Mike Johnson has said that the House of Representatives should vote as soon as possible following a Senate vote on Sunday that could allow the government to reopen. The Senate is set to reconvene, with Republican leaders seeking a bipartisan agreement to bypass procedural hurdles and pass the measure quickly. Without such an agreement, the Senate would need much of the coming week to complete procedural steps, potentially extending the government shutdown into next weekend. Sunday's deal was negotiated by Democratic Senators Maggie Hassan and Jeanine Shaheen of New Hampshire, along with Independent Senator Angus King in Maine. Let's in fact listen in to what Mike Johnson had to say.
At the very moment that they do that final vote, I will call all House members to return to Washington as quickly as possible. We'll give a 36-hour formal and official notice so that we can vote as soon as possible to pass the amended CR bill and get it to the President's desk. As you all know, we look forward to the government reopening this week so Congress can get back to our regular legislative session. We have a lot of business to do, as you all know. The Senate's vote late last night of 60 to 40 opens the door now. The Senate is moving forward on an amended House CR, a continuing resolution, that will reopen the government until January 30th. Added to that are provisions to fully fund SNAP provisions through the end of the next fiscal year, which is September 2026, guaranteed back pay for all federal workers who have been made to endure these hardships over the last several weeks. And it also includes passage of 3 appropriations bills, which we're grateful to be moving through the process.
Now shifting our focus to some news updates from United Kingdom, the BBC has issued an apology after a speech by US President Donald Trump was edited in an episode of Panorama. In a letter, the Culture, Media and Sports Committee of MPS, BBC Chairman Samir Shah said it would have been better to take more formal action after it was revealed that the corporation edited a Trump speech. The concerns regard clips spliced together from sections of the US President's speech on January 6, 2021 to make it appear he told supporters he was going to walk to the US Capitol with them to fight like hell. Trump responded to the pair's resignations last night, describing Tim Davey and Deborah Turnus as very dishonest people who tried to step on the scales of a presidential election in a post on Truth Social. The concerns about the Trump documentary edit first came to light in a leaked memo from Michael Prescott, a former journalist and independent advisor to the BBC's editorial guidelines and standards board. Let's listen in to what Chairman Samir Shah had to say about this.
The apologizing is for the way the team edited President Trump's speech to his supporters on January the 6th. It was public, we discussed it, and indeed the reservations and there were some people on the board who felt very strongly it was wrong, others defended it. It was discussed at Panorama, so they knew about that. But I think the point I'm making is, in hindsight, we should have acted earlier and taken a more formal position on it, which we've done more recently. Part of the problem is the way it was edited. Yeah. But what was the consequence of that? I think we just need to go into a bit more detail, which is what we finally did, which was the impression it left on the British audience, as opposed to the intention of the programme, which was to give the panorama, the British audience, some understanding of how President Trump supporters were reading it. Now, that's quite a complicated set of thoughts, and we need to get that right. Let's be clear about the role of the board. We are a non-executive board, 10 of us are non-execs, 4 execs. The job of the board is to review BBC output and to maintain and to represent the public interest. It is not our job to determine who or who should not be the Director of News. That is the job of the Director General. It is for him to say and for him to determine. And that's the only position I take, and I insist that the board takes.
Now, Roger Morsay, former head of BBC Television News, says that he is so sad to see Davies' career at the BBC end this way, but also condemned the broadcaster's slow reaction to the recent allegations. He also stated that the politicians need to give the BBC space to breathe to be the public service organization that it wants to be. The BBC had been under mounting pressure after an internal report by a former standards advisor was leaked to the Daily Telegraph newspaper. Meanwhile, the White House had recently denounced the broadcaster as a propaganda machine after its flagship Panorama program was found to have edited 2 parts of Trump's speech together, so he appeared to encourage the Capitol Hill riots of January 2021. Listen in to what Roger had to say.
Sad for Tim personally. I worked with him quite a lot in the BBC. He was one of the people who was involved in supporting the Olympics coverage, and I worked with him when he was acting Director General in 2012. And he is a very clever and bright man. He is personally kind, and I really regret that his BBC career has ended in this way. So I'm very sad for him personally. We don't know yet what happened within the labyrinthine committee meetings and discussions in the BBC, but the BBC was slow to respond to the latest allegations, and I think they were flat-footed for 3 or 4 days when the story broke about the Michael Prescott dossier. That said, the Director General of the BBC is the most enormous job, and you're dealing with MasterChef, and you're dealing with Hugh Edwards, and you're dealing with all these other issues that happen. And I think it's almost too much for one person. And if you look at the recent history of DG, with George Entwistle having to resign, Greg Dyke having to resign, all the pressures on Tim Davie, it's a simple question. Is DG of the BBC too big a job for one person? And does it need the BBC to rethink the way it handles both its editorial and its chief executive officer? I hope the BBC will look very widely for who the next Director General should be. Most of the recent Director Generals have been in various ways from inside the BBC, and it's early days, but it would be good to get a wider outside perspective. I think also the politicians need to give the BBC space to breathe, to be the public service organisation that it wants to be. And it's very important. The BBC as well needs to listen to the public. And I think one of the challenges which the Prescott document shows is that there have been times when the BBC has gone in maybe rather a liberal direction, and that hasn't necessarily won the affections and loyalties of other parts of the audience. So it's a difficult job, but the BBC needs to get on with public service broadcasting, have support from politicians, proper funding, and find the people who have got the vision to lead it into the future. And there's no doubt there are vociferous campaigns against the BBC, either for ideological reasons or commercial reasons. And the BBC has lots of enemies out there. Now, that happens. I mean, the BBC has to live with that. What it then has to do, of course, is be as good as it possibly can be.
Londoners are also reacting to the resignation of the BBC's Director General and Head of News following the editing of a speech that implied Donald Trump directly instigated the attack on the US Capitol. Many have expressed concern, calling it a challenging time for the BBC, with its reputation now tarnished. Let's in fact listen in to what some of the Londoners had to say.
Well, my feeling is that the Director General's resignation comes out of exhaustion, that he's been so... It's such an incredibly heavy job, and there's a limit to how long you can do it. And there's been a lot of pressure. It's a very difficult time. I feel that the BBC has always been attacked from the right and from the left. The editing that was done, that does seem problematic. But we make mistakes. I mean, things do happen, and goodness knows, Trump has had a pretty fair airing in many ways. Well, I hope it won't. I certainly think that the World Service has an incredible reputation, and that in many countries it's an absolute lifesaver in terms of news that they can't get any other way at all. In some countries, in the US, for instance, it probably will make a difference.
I think they were both right to go. I do think the reputation of the BBC has been tarnished because you rely on the BBC for impartiality. And I think the past year, they've shown that they're not impartial, reporting on certain world events. Lack of impartiality. And once you erode the trust with the public, you've seen that now with our government, the Labour government. Once trust is eroded, it's very hard to build back up.
Former French President Nicolas Sarkozy is set to leave La Santé prison in Paris after a court granted his early release pending an appeal. His lawyer stated that the next step will be preparing his appeal against his earlier conviction. Now, Sarkozy was earlier sentenced to 5 years in prison for attempting to secure campaign funds from Libya for his 2007 presidential campaign. He has been imprisoned since October 21st. But today the court has ruled that Sarkozy would be freed under strict judicial supervision, including a ban on leaving France and no contact with others involved in the case. Meanwhile, Sarkozy has consistently denied the charges, claiming he is the victim of political revenge. Let's now listen in to how some Parisians reacted to his release and their thoughts on the impartiality of French justice.
Mieux pour lui. Bon, après, ça, il y a toujours le bénéfice du doute, hein, donc bon, malgré tout, je pense qu'il a pactisé avec le diable, et donc ça se paye à un moment donné. Voilà, c'est bon pour lui.
Il a été président de la République, s'il y a association de malfaiteurs, comme n'importe quel autre Français, il doit aller en prison. Voilà. Au contraire, je trouve qu'il doit être irréprochable quand on est à la tête d'un État, quand des millions de personnes, quand des millions de concitoyens ont fait confiance en l'élisant, je trouve qu'il se doit d'être irréprochable.
Now let's shift our focus to Brazil. At the UN COP30 climate talks in Belém, Brazilian President Inácio Lula da Silva emphasized that combating climate change is much cheaper than waging war. He urged global leaders to act urgently, stressing that the cost of inaction far outweighs the price of climate solution. Let's in fact listen in to what the Brazilian president had to say.
É muito mais barato colocar 1,3 trilhão de dólares para a gente acabar com o problema climático do que colocar 2,7 trilhões de dólares para fazer guerra como fizeram no ano passado.
Meanwhile, Simon Steele, the head of the UN's climate body, also warned that the world can no longer afford delays in addressing climate change, as the ongoing environmental disasters are increasingly devastating economies and livelihoods worldwide. The COP30 conference in the Amazonian city of Belém serves as a critical platform for global leaders to negotiate strategies to mitigate climate impacts and avert further environmental collapse. Listen in.
Not one single nation among you can afford this, as climate disasters rip double digits off GDP. To falter whilst mega droughts wreck national harvests, sending food prices soaring, makes zero sense economically or politically. To squabble while famines take hold, forcing millions to flee their homelands. This will never be forgotten as conflicts spread. While climate disasters decimate the lives of millions, when we already have the solutions. This will never, ever be forgiven.
Now, breaking news coming in from Malaysia. Authorities in Malaysia and Thailand have recovered at least 21 bodies as they search for survivors after a boat carrying undocumented migrants capsized earlier today. Officials said that the boat was carrying about 70 migrants, many believed to be from Myanmar's persecuted Rohingya community, trying to reach Malaysia when it capsized near Thailand's Tarutao Island 4 days ago. They were believed to have been part of a larger group of some 300 people who were split between at least 2 boats. The 7 people recovered at the weekend have all been identified as Rohingyas. The officials have said that the search and rescue operations is expected to last at least 7 days. Listen to what the director of the Malaysian Maritime Enforcement Agency had to say about the rescue operation.
Seterusnya pada hari ini, sehingga jam 6 petang ini, kita telah menjumpai sebanyak 5 mayat. Kebanyakan mayat yang ditemui ini di kawasan perairan barat Pulau Langkawi. Ya, ianya ditemui bermula jam 12.45 tengah hari tadi, sehingga yang last tadi lebih kurang pukul 3, 10 minutes to 3. Kesemua mayat telah pun kita berjaya bawa ke JT dan kita akan ada yang telah kita serahkan kepada pihak polis. Tidak berlaku capsize ataupun karam, possibility kita akan berjaya menahan boat yang consist of 100 of passenger ni kan, untuk kita deviate dia ke.
Now let's shift our focus to Lahore as toxic smog has shrouded Pakistan's cultural capital, with air quality hitting hazardous levels and posing a severe health threat to the city's millions, particularly its outdoor laborers. This is as per the data of the Swiss group IQAI. The city recorded an air quality index of 324 level that forces most residents to limit outdoor activity but leaves construction workers with no such options. For laborers like Mohammed Arif, the smog is a dual crisis, harming their health and straining their finances. Each winter, plain areas of Punjab province, of which Lahore is the capital, are gripped by thick smoke as cold and heavy air traps pollutants from construction dust, vehicle emissions and agricultural fires. While the provisional government has previously deployed measures such as anti-smog guns, these offer only temporary relief, leaving vulnerable populations exposed. Let's listen in to what the construction worker Mohammed Arif had to say about the prevailing conditions.
ਤੇ ਦਿਹਾੜੀ ਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਕੁਝ ਸੋਚਿਆ ਜਾਵੇ, ਉਹੀ ਕਮਾਣੇ ਉਹੀ ਸੱਟਾਂ ਲੱਗ ਜਾਂਦੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਸਮੋਕ ਦੀ ਵਜ੍ਹਾ ਤੋਂ, ਮੌਸਮ ਦੀ ਵਜ੍ਹਾ ਤੋਂ ਬਹੁਤ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਨਾ ਨੁਕਸਾਨ ਹੋ ਰਿਹਾ। ਨਾ ਕੋਈ ਸਾਡੇ ਕੋਲ ਸਹੂਲਤ ਹੈ ਮਾਸ ਵਗੈਰਾ, ਨਾ ਕੋਈ ਜਨਾਬ ਸਾਡੇ ਦਸਤਾਨੇ, ਉਤੋਂ ਠੰਡ ਆ ਗਈ ਹੈ ਜਨਾਬ, ਤੇ ਕੁਝ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾਵੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਬਾਰੇ, ਬਹੁਤ ਮਿਹਰਬਾਨੀ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ।
With that, it's a wrap on the newsroom. Keep watching for